liberator of the Holocaust. Don, thank you very much for giving testimony, a very precious gift to all of us and future generations. Don, may I have your full name and where you were born and when you were born?
My name is Doris Duplechein. My wife gave me the name of Don 47 years ago. I was born in a little place, Malvin, Louisiana, about 4 miles from Jennings, my draft board. I entered the service June the 3rd, 1943. From there, I was shipped to Camp Pickett, Virginia. That's where we met Fisher, Darden, and all the rest of this company. We trained there for 4 months.
And where did you go after that?
After leaving Camp Pickett, we went to Camp Ellis, Illinois, where we trained to drive ambulance. We learned to drive ambulance, and we learned in the snow, sliding down hills and different. So we was really ready, equipped when we got to Germany, because it was very cold in Germany.
Now, was this a medical unit?
Yeah, it was the 567 all-black medical ambulance company, and we were in the 433rd Medical Battalion.
Was this the first all-black medical unit in the Army?
Yes, I believe it was.
We have here a picture. Is this your unit here?
Yes, that's a picture of the unit. It was taken in Camp Garden, Georgia.
Can you point out some of the people in it? Yourself?
That's me right there. That's Captain Kennedy. That's Lieutenant Rosenthal. And his name was Kenty. I forget his name. I have it down on the other picture. That is Sergeant Joan Leaf from St. Louis, Missouri. That's Sergeant Creighton. He was from Louisville, Kentucky. And I know lots of people on there. But,
how about Pastor Fisher? Is he on there also?
Yeah, that's Reverend Fisher right there. And that's Reverend Darden right there. This guy is Clyde Edmond. I spoke to him a month ago. He lives in Suffolk, Virginia. This guy is Harold Cross. He lives in Portland, Virginia. I spoke to him about a month ago.
This unit was formed when?
The unit was formed in 1943.
About 50 years ago.
50 years ago. We met 50 years ago. Next month we met. In June it'll be 50 years.
Let me back up for a moment and ask you about your childhood. You were born in a small town?
A real small place on the Mamito River, where I grew up. I did a lot of hunting, and it was during the Depression. It was real tough, so we had to go out and kill games to have meat, because at the time it was really tough.
Your family, how many brothers and sisters?
3 brothers and 1 sister.
Was it a religious family?
Yes. Baptist.
Going to church every Sunday?
Yes, we did.
A good childhood, a happy childhood?
About as happy as it could be. I mean, with the conditions that were present.
When you grew up, did you meet many or know many Jewish people?
No, there were, in Louisiana, at the time, I don't think there were too many Jewish people in Louisiana.
How did you end up getting into a medical unit?
When I was drafted, first they tried to get me to go in the Air Force. I told them no. And then they tried me, said, we'll put you in the Navy. I said, no, I don't want the Navy. And they said, well, you just made it by a pound and a half, you can go in the Army. So they asked me did I believe in killing? I told them no. So they put me in the medics.
And this group was in a number of places for training. How many years did you train to be a medic, or how long?
Well, the first training was 4 months training, and then the next 4 months, maybe we were in Camp Ellis, Illinois training, and it was mostly driving and operating ambulance. From there, we went to Camp Gordon, Georgia. We had more training with medical, driving. From there, we went to Camp Rucker, Alabama. From Camp Rucker, we stayed there 1 month. We went to White Plains, New York. We were there about a couple of weeks. From there, we boarded Queen Mary, and we landed in Liverpool, no, Glasgow, England. From there, we caught a train to Liverpool. We spent maybe 3 weeks in Liverpool before going to Hampton, I believe it was called, where the whole battalion, we boarded 3 LSDs. And we had an overnight, taking us all night to cross the channel, because it was one of the furthest place from Hampton to where we went into the, I forget the name of the river, up into Rhines, the little town, and where we on.
In France.
Yeah. And the Army was well above past Paris, where we caught up to the Army.
So you were stationed in the front lines almost immediately?
Yes, we were falling right behind. We had, each company had a field hospital. So we had a field hospital that we traveled along with. All the wounded we had to take to this field hospital. And from that field hospital, we had to take them to a VAC hospital, which was more up to date. And the longest stay, I think, was in another place called Rennes. They almost spelled the same as the first place where we landed. We bottled up there for 3 or 4 weeks, I guess. The snow was 7 feet. That was during the time the Budge, when the Germans broke through. Mm-hmm. I believe they had sent a lot of Germans into the back line and penetrated. One of them penetrated our building and stayed with us for 2 weeks. He knew everything about Chicago, the ball games and everything. We didn't realize it until one night, about, I guess, 2 o'clock. He got up, cut the gas off, turned the gas back on, and I woke up, and the place was full of gas. And I called out, "Don't light no match. The place full of gas." And he intended to kill us all.
During this time in France and then on out into Germany, you were in the front lines and saw a lot of action?
Yeah, we were right behind the front line, closest we could get.
Did your group suffer many casualties?
No, we were lucky because the German did respect the Red Cross. And there were times at night we were in danger because they used to shoot up bridges and highways. And when you're driving at night, and they just come strafing down the highway. And there have been the times I've had GIs in there that were shot, and they could hear those airplanes. They had a special sound. Even those guys were wounded, they knew the sound, and they'd say, "Stop, stop, let me get out of here," and they'd hit the ditch.
Tell me about when you went into Germany and when you first reached Dachau.
Well, they were moving pretty fast, way past Heidelberg. And one night we got a call, the 29th of April. They woke us up about 12 o'clock. They woke up the first platoon. And the lieutenant says, get ready, we got to go. And it taken us maybe 4 hours to reach Dachau because it was snowing, very cold. And they said, get to Dachau as soon as possible. We arrived at Dachau at 6:30 on the 30th of April, at 6:30 in the morning. When we got to the little small town outside of Munich, the MP directed us to the prison camp. So when we pulled in front of the prison camp, the barracks, we pulled in there and Lieutenant Rosenthal says, this is it. And I walked through the big gates, walked about 200 yards. I came up to all the bodies next to the gas chamber. And he showed me that how the gas chamber had worked. They turned on thought they were turning on water, and they were turning on gas, and the door would automatically close, and they couldn't cut it off. But on the way walking from the gate, to the right was the fence separating the prison from the main building where the gas chamber and the cafeteria and all this was. And everyone was hollering, you know, begging for food and water because they had been left there alone. There was no soldiers there except dead German soldiers.
After you saw the gas chamber, what did you do then?
Then we had to move into the quarters. We moved into we were there first, so we moved into the officers' quarter. And that is the place where we had to go and get coal to heat up the boilers and stuff. That is where we find all the liquor, down in the basement. And our first duty when we got there was to set up soup lines. Our cooks had to set up the soup line to feed these people because they couldn't eat any solid food for maybe 2 weeks. We had to just continuously feed them this soup. But in the first few days before the hospital caught up with us, it was maybe 3 or 4 days. After the hospital caught up with us, we had to take these people, clean them up, get the bugs off of them before we could take them to the hospital. Then we had to do the same thing to the barracks where they were living, which was like 14 people supposed to have been living in each room. They had 28. So we had to clean these people up, take them to the hospital before the hospital would accept them, clean up the barracks, and then after the hospital seen them, we had to bring them back. And after 6 weeks, they were really coming along good. They started exercising, training, and after 8 weeks, we stayed there 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, we got a call to go to France. We went to camp, there's 4 camps, I think, Camp Lucky Strike, Camp, I will name after cigarettes, Camp Chesterfield. And
Don, before we go on to France, I have some questions about Dachau. You saw the gas chambers. Were there any ovens there, any crematoria?
Yes, there were. The gas chamber was next door. They were next door to each other.
And they were still in use when you arrived there?
Well, all the day people was outside, so I'm sure they left in such a hurry. They didn't even have time to booby trap the quarters where we lived at.
You say the people could not take solid food. I take it they were all very emaciated, very...
The people there, I guess the largest one maybe weighed 85 pounds. There was around 80, 85 pounds, all the people in the camp.
So after the first few days you were there, when you settled into a routine, your job was to clean them up, feed them.
Take them to the hospital, get them checked, clean their barrack, and then bring them back till they got strong enough. And that was maybe just before we left there. We were there for 8 weeks at Dakar.
You say outside of the crematoria there were stacks of bodies?
Right.
Were there other bodies scattered throughout the camp?
Well, there were dead soldiers out there where they were still on the ground, the Germans. Mm-hmm. It had been snowing that night, and they were partially covered with snow. And this is where I got this from a dead German officer. And I've been having this for 40. This past April the 30th is 48 years. I've been having this.
It was a dead German officer on the grounds?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dead officers, dead soldiers.
Did you encounter any live soldiers at all?
I did not.
Are there any incidents that you care to recall, people that you met, particular prisoners, any events that occurred that stick out in your mind?
I don't know. I met a guy, he said he was American. I met him about 6 months later in Paris. And he said he was one of 2 Americans that were there. And he weighed about 150 pounds. I said, well, why don't you go home? He said, I'm trying to wait until I get my weight back, which is 180, 185 pounds.
The general sanitary conditions in the camp were extremely bad. Extremely
bad. I don't know how they'd survive, or they were using these people. I don't know why they didn't feed them. They were using them to make guns underneath the camp of Dakar. I brought back a gun that I took from the underground factory down there, and I sold it. I got in short of money one day. I was still in service, and I sold it to a friend of mine in Frisco. And he died. I went back to try and get this gun, but someone had stolen it.
Were there women and children in the camp also?
Yes.
And the children were also in bad health?
Everybody was in bad health. Everywhere you look, those people was just skin and bone.
Prior to that morning, April 30th, 1945, did you or anybody else in your group have any idea where you were going or what you would see?
No. When they told us we were moving, and I was driving Lieutenant Rosenthal, and he didn't tell me nothing until we stopped in front of the barrack. And I'm sure the commanding officer had talked to him and told him what it was. And we didn't know we were going to a prison. And when we got there, he says, okay, this is it.
During those first couple of weeks you were there, did any other military officers or medical groups come in to join you?
No. It was just us. We were on our own. We had to take care of the camp, take the people out to the hospital, because the hospital wouldn't come to the camp.
So it was just your group entirely?
Up to us to take them out, clean up the barracks, and after the doctor see them, bring them back. and it was our duty to feed them and give them water.
How long were you there?
8 weeks. We were there 8 weeks.
Why do you think that no other groups joined you?
I don't know what's the reason or why. I know nobody joined us over there.
I've heard that the first people going into the camps were sprayed with DDT because there was so much disease within the camp.
Yeah, it was disease, and there was lice, and anything you wanted to crawl on you, they had it. And we had to make sure they didn't get on us. We still wind up with getting those. They had a big lice, and they'd get in your head, and it was hard to get out.
As you look back on that experience today, can you give me some feeling as to how it affected your life, or what you think about it looking back?
Well, I wonder how can people be so low to go around and kill and punish people and starve them to death the way that they did these people in the camp. And the same thing, well, you're often wondering right now why they're letting the same thing happen in Bosnia. Killing and starving these people, making sure they don't get food by shooting up the vehicles on the way to carry the food to them.
I think it's important that we have your testimony so that we know the truth. Is there anything else you'd like to add about what you experienced at Dachau, or just any general comments at all you'd like to make?
Well, all I can say, everything we spoken about is the truth, and we were there. We were the first soldiers there after the camp was taken, and we were the only soldiers there that taking care of those people in the camp.
It's incredible that you would be the only ones there, and they wouldn't send in additional for so many weeks.
That's right. They didn't send any help. We had to take the people out to the hospital, and there was no room, no place to put them at the hospital, so we had to, after they were cleaned up and deliced, we had to bring them back.
On behalf of the Holocaust Oral History Project of the Orange County Anti-Defamation League, again, thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate your time and effort, your coming here and giving testimony, and letting this be known. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Shalom. I am David Kennedy, an interviewer for the Holocaust Oral History Project of the Orange County Anti-Defamation League. Today, May 21st, 1993, we are interviewing Malvin Darden, a liberator of the Holocaust. Thank you very much, Mr. Darden, for giving testimony, a very precious gift to all of us and future generations. May I have your name, where you were born, and date of birth?
Malvin Darden. I was born in a small town, Texas, Fayetteville, Texas. I was born 10/12/24.
And you are a minister today?
Yes, I pastor the Baptist Church in Pasadena, California.
Tell me something about your family life, Pastor. Your family, was it very religious?
They were very religious. My grandfather on my mother's side was a Baptist minister. I have two uncles on my mother's side who were Baptist ministers. My father was a steward in the Methodist Church. My whole family was very religious.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have two sisters and one brother.
And is your brother a pastor also?
No, he's not a pastor.
What was your early childhood like?
Very interesting. I used to play baseball and grew up on a farm, of course. Picked a lot of cotton. And I played baseball. I sung with the religious groups, several religious groups, practically all over the state of Texas. And it was very interesting.
Tell me about the time when you were drafted into the Army.
I was 18 years old, and I was living in Lawton, Oklahoma at the time. I was working there, and I was drafted from Lawton, and my induction station was in Oklahoma City. And there we went from Oklahoma City to Camp Pickett, Virginia. And that's where I met the rest of my buddies, Duplechein and Jerome Fisher. And there where we had our basic training in Camp Pickett, Virginia.
Tell me a little bit about that group that you joined. It was a medical group?
It was a medical group. I think it was the 567 Medical Ambulance Company. And we had our basic training of right there in Camp Pickett.
When you finished your training, where did you go?
We went from there to Camp Ellis, Illinois. And there we were there for our advanced training of 13 weeks in Camp Ellis. And that's where we were taking training for driving ambulance. Mostly our training in Camp Ellis was driving.
And eventually you were sent to Europe?
Well, after we'd gone to other places from Camp Ellis, we went to Camp Garden, Georgia, and that's where we began taking our medical training. From Camp Garden, Georgia, I think we went to Camp Rucker, Alabama, and from there to New York, and then that's when we was shipped over on the Queen Mary, and we landed in Glasgow, Scotland. And from Glasgow, Scotland, we went to England, and we stayed there. I can't recall exactly how long, but several weeks, and then we were shipped over to France. It took us about a night to cross the English Channel.
What kind of medical training did you have?
Well, they taught us how to do bandages and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and how to take vital signs and all of that. We was taught all of that. But mostly our job was driving ambulance. After
you reached France, then did you go to the front lines? What happened then?
Well, we usually stayed, after I got into France, shortly after I got into France, I was wounded. And my company went off and left me for, several weeks, months. And I finally caught up with them up in France just before we got into Germany. But we was always mostly behind the line following the infantry. We was from 1 to 3 miles behind the front lines. But I was wounded and My good friend Fisher was the one that rescued me.
Tell me about that.
Well, we was convoying, and unfortunately, one of my sergeants was driving, and it was an icy road, and he wasn't too much on driving. And when we hit this black ice, and the ambulance began to kind of sway, and I woke up and I hollered, "Don't hit the brakes," and that's what he did. He hit the brakes, and we just spin around right in the middle of the road and ran into a tree, and my head went right through the windshield. That's why I have these scars in my forehead now. And we ended up down in a ravine. And so when the when the convoy stopped for a break, Fisher recognized I was bringing up most of the rear, and Fisher recognized that I wasn't in the convoy. And he broke ranks and came back and found me. And when he found me, I was down in a ravine of 15, 20 feet. And a lot of Frenchmen was around me, and they was giving me drinks to keep me warm and etc. And he brought me up that ravine on his shoulder. And it's really a wonder he didn't get court-martialed for breaking ranks. And looked like they just bind us together. Right now we go as brothers, and we're just that close. And so the company went off and left me because I was in the hospital for a period of time. I know it was better than a month, and finally I caught up with them. And then that's when we went on into Germany.
Tell me about when you arrived at Dachau.
When we arrived in Dachau, it was early one morning, approximately around 6:30. And when we arrived there, the lieutenant, I think he was our platoon leader, he just told us that this is it. And when we got there, we discovered that there was a lot of dead bodies piled up. And we took a sightseeing tour of Dachau, and we found the crematories and the what you call them, where they were doing all the killing. But anyway, we found all of that, and we saw a lot of dead soldiers laying around over the place.
So when you arrived, the place was, there were no soldiers, no alarm?
No soldiers there at all. Yeah. We was only soldiers there. And our job was to those DPs that were still alive. I can remember so vividly how they would line it up around the fence, and they saw us, and they was begging for food. And we would give some, but then we couldn't do it because the company commander stopped us from giving them our food. And then our main job was to evacuate them to the hospital, clean them up, take them to the hospitals, and so they could be cleaned up. Matter of fact, our ambulance ran 23 hours a day, 23 hours a day. That's how our ambulance rode. Like, we had 30 ambulances, we had 60 drivers. One driver would go on at 6 o'clock in the morning, he'd drive until 5:30 in the evening with an hour break for lunch. And then we'd stop driving at 5:30, then we would have to service our vehicle and get it ready for the next driver to come on at 6. And they would drive all night, getting them to the hospitals and bringing them back. And we had to be sprayed twice a day with DDT because of the germs and the lice and etc. that was there in the camp.
Describe the condition of the people in the camp.
Well, they had lost weight. There was some, I've talked with some who said when they was put into this concentration camp, they were weighing better than 200. And when we arrived there, they was weighing way less than 100. And we have been trying to be putting some of them into the ambulances, and they just die in our arms as we would be assisting them to get into the ambulance. The condition was very bad.
Were there gas chambers there also?
The gas chambers, that's what I was trying to say just a moment ago. They had gas chambers, and they were killing a certain amount every day. They would give them soap, towels, and they would send them in to take a shower. And once they would go in and they'd pull a chain thinking that water would come out, and it would be gas, and the iron door would automatically lock. And so there's no way for them to escape. They had to stay there, and they would die by that gas.
Did you see women and children in the camp?
Yes, women and children were there. And it was sad. And just to see how they would take them out of those gas chambers and stack them up, throw them up on a pile. And it was really sad. And that were people who was actually eating human flesh because of no food.
You actually saw people?
Mm-hmm. We actually saw that.
After the first few days in the camp, could you describe what would be a typical day for you? What did you do?
Well, I can't really describe. I can't really remember exactly per se what I did because we were busy trying to evacuate, getting these DPs from Dachau to the hospital, cleaning them up, and that was really our job. So I can't really recall per se what one of my days was like because they all were very, very busy and frightening.
Your group was a all-black medical group?
All black medical group. Only white we had was our officers, our company commander and several platoon officers, but the whole company was black. And if I can recall, we were the only black medical group that was in that area at that time.
During the time you were at Dachau, did other groups come in to assist you?
No. We were the only group of soldiers there, and we were there for 6, 7, 8 weeks somewhere in that neighborhood.
Do you have any idea how many prisoners there were there?
Oh, it was several hundred. It was several hundred prisoners there. And there was several hundred dead stacked up. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they was killing around 100 a day. I know they had 10 gas chambers, and that's what they were.
Did you see any open graves?
No, I can't recall any open graves, no.
And the condition of the prisoners was?
It was bad.
Extremely bad.
Mm-hmm. Very
Sanitary
bad.
conditions were very poor also.
Mm-hmm.
How long were you there?
We was there 7, 8 weeks, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Then what happened?
Well, after we left there, we went back up France, and we was after the war ended in Europe, we were alerted to go to Japan. Fortunately, the war ended before we had to go. So we were sent back to, I think I can remember, I was in Camp Lucky Strike. The camps over in England, in France at that time was named Lucky Strike, Philip Morris, and after cigarettes. And I think I was there from, I was in Camp Lucky Strike. And then we began to get discharges, those who had high points. And Mr. Fisher was, he was my platoon leader, so he had more points than I because I was, unfortunately, one of the only ones in the company that was a PFC. All the rest of them was T5s and whatnot, corporal. But I was the only one in the company that was a PFC, so my points were kind of low. So he left us there, and when we were discharged, when my prince came, I sailed out of Camp Lucky Strike on the Wheaton Victory. It took us 12 days to come home, and I was discharged out of Camp Chaffee, Arkansas.
When your group was pulled out of Dachau, why do you think you were pulled out? Did a replacement group come in?
No, we had just about cleaned up everything there. And I'm sure a replacement came in, but they didn't come in to relieve us. I think we had just about done everything that was required. I don't think it was any DPs left. They all had been evacuated, if I can recall well.
Tell me about your recollection today. Do you still, how has it affected your life?
Well, I'm very hyper, and I feel like that's because of something. I have very restless nights occasionally. I think it really had a great impact on me. I'm very hyper, very nervous.
Would you have become a pastor if you hadn't gone to Dachau?
I feel like I would have.
Would your outlook on life be the same as a pastor?
I don't think it would have been. I think I'm more compassionate now than I would have been if I had not gone to Dachau. Because I saw the needs of how people had to suffer, and my heart goes out to that. If I see someone in that same state today, my heart goes out to them. I'm very compassionate. And I feel like Dachau had lots to do with it.
Are there any particular incidents that occurred at Dachau that you would like to relate? Or?
Yes, Mr. Fish and I was in the basement of of our quarters once, and we ran up on an SS trooper, big healthy guy, and I was the one that hit him, and I hit him with all my might, but he just stood there and looked at me as though I hadn't done anything. So I think of that quite often. It was a very tragic experience.
But was that the only German soldier that was alive that you found?
No, we found others, and there was some who had hidden in the camp with the DPs. I guess after the infantry went in and the soldiers went in, and they had to evacuate in order to try to save themselves, they went into the camp with the DPs. And I can remember that one was discovered by those DPs, and you should see what they did to him. And I can remember how they did him, and then they just took a wire brush, and just scratched his head, because after they discovered that he was one.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell me about your experiences at Dachau?
Well, no, I'm somewhat glad that I did have the experience of going into Dachau, and it was a terrible scene, and I thank God that we had a chance to be a part in deliberating them.
What was the day when you went in there, the date?
I think it was around May 1, maybe May 2, somewhere in that neighborhood. I know it was at the very first part of May.
I want to thank you very much for coming and giving testimony today.
Thank you.
This concludes our interview. On behalf of the Holocaust Oral History Project of the Orange County Anti-Defamation League, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We sincerely appreciate your time and effort in coming and giving testimony.
I hope that I was some help.
I'm sure of it.
Thank you. and he wasn't too much on driving. And when we hit this black ice, and the ambulance began to kind of sway, and I woke up and I hollered, "Don't hit the brakes," and that's what he did. He hit the brakes, and we just spun around right in the middle of the road and ran into a tree, and my head went right through the windshield. That's why I have these scars on my forehead now. And we ended up down in a ravine. And so when the ambulance, when the convoy stopped for a break, Fisher recognized I was bringing up most of the rear, and Fisher recognized that I wasn't in the convoy, and he broke ranks and came back and found me. And when he found me, I was down in a ravine of 15, 20 feet, and a lot of Frenchmen was around me, and they was giving me drinks to keep me warm and etc. And he brought me up that ravine on his shoulder. And it's really a wonder he didn't get court-martialed for breaking ranks. And looked like they just bind us together. Right now we go as brothers, and we're just that close. And so the company went off and left me because I was in the hospital for a period of time. I know it was better than a month, and finally I caught up with them. And then that's when we went on into Germany.
Tell me about when you arrived at Dachau.
When we arrived in Dachau, it was early one morning, approximately around 6:30. And when we arrived there, the lieutenant, I think he was our platoon leader, he just told us that this is it. And when we got there, we discovered that there was a lot of dead bodies piled up. And we took a sightseeing tour of Dachau, and we found the crematories and the what you call them, where they were doing all the killing. But anyway, we found all of that, and we saw a lot of dead soldiers laying around over the place.
So when you arrived, the place was, there were no soldiers,
no soldiers there at all.
Yeah.
We was only soldiers there, and our job was to those DPs that were still alive. I can remember so vividly how they would line it up around the fence, and they saw us, and they was begging for food, and we would give some, but then we couldn't do it because the company commander stopped us from giving them our food. And then our main job was to evacuate them to the hospital, clean them up, take them to the hospitals, and so they could be cleaned up. Matter of fact, our ambulance ran 23 hours a day, 23 hours a day. That's how our ambulance rode. Like, we had 30 ambulances, we had 60 drivers. One driver would go on at 6 o'clock in the morning, he'd drive until 5:30 in the evening with an hour break for lunch. And then we'd stop driving at 5:30, then we would have to service our vehicle and get it ready for the next driver to come on at 6. And they would drive all night, getting them to the hospitals and bringing them back. And we had to be sprayed twice a day with DDT because of the germs and the lice and etc. that was there in the camp.
Describe the condition of the people in the camp.
Well, they had lost weight. There was some, I've talked with some who said when they was put into this concentration camp, they were weighing better than 200. And when we arrived there, they was weighing way less than 100. And we have been trying to be putting some of them into the ambulances, and they just die in our arms as we would be assisting them to get into the ambulance. The condition was very bad.
Were there gas chambers there also?
The gas chambers, that's what I was trying to say just a moment ago. They had gas chambers, and they were killing a certain amount every day. They would give them soap, towels, and they would send them in to take a shower. And once they would go in and They'd pull a chain thinking that water would come out, and it would be gas, and the iron door would automatically lock. And so there's no way for them to escape. They had to stay there, and they would die by that gas.
Did you see women and children in the camp?
Yes, women and children were there. And it was sad. And just to see how they would take them out of those gas chambers and stack them up, throw them up on a pile. And it was really sad. And that were people who was actually eating human flesh because of no food.
You actually saw people?
Mm-hmm. We actually saw that.
After the first few days in the camp, could you describe what would be a typical day for you? What did you do?
Well, I can't really describe. I can't really remember exactly per se what I did because we were busy trying to evacuate, getting these DPs from Dachau to the hospital, cleaning them up, and that was really our job. So I can't really recall per se what one of my days was like because they all were very, very busy and frightening.
Your group was a all-black medical group?
All black medical group. Only white we had was our officers, our company commander and several platoon officers.